ep.561.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Brandes, also known as Ricky Brandes, and a great episode for you today. I know I say that before every episode, but today's show is truly special. This is one of the reasons why I truly appreciate doing this, doing the podcast, and really enjoying the honor of interviewing so many people that I'm a fan of and people that I grew up watching on TV or grew up listening to on the radio or in my car. And this is one of those guests. Today's guest is TJ Miller. He is the vocalist of one of my favorite bands growing up, a metalcore band from Michigan called Still Remains. Their sound was so ahead of their time. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but it really was. Their first album of Love and Lunacy was absolutely amazing. Till this day, I can put it on now. Doesn't sound old or outdated at all. And even since 2005, when that album came out, not a lot of bands have combined catchiness, hooks with metalcore breakdowns and amazing synths and keyboards. In 2005, when that album came out, it was so ahead of its time that if you listen to it today, you'll be surprised to know it's 20 years old. It's funny how life works out. At that time, the band was such an important part of my upbringing. Them and bands like Fear Factory and 1 Minute Silence, and so many other bands that were so important because they were the bands I was listening to while I was trying to figure out life. I'm in my early 20s. I'm right out of high school. And it was the music I was listening to when I was going to play basketball, when I was going to the gym or band practice, trying to recreate some of these sounds I loved. I think we all have a soundtrack for each journey and chapter of our lives. And Still Remains was definitely the music, the soundtrack to some of my early 20s. So like I said, truly an honor to be able to talk to TJ. I hope my music and my podcast can have a slightly similar impact on people listening. And some conversations I think have a higher potential of doing so. And I think today is one of those conversations because we don't just talk about the history of Still Remains and the origin story of Still Remains, but we also talk about the history of TJ Miller and the origin story of TJ and some of his upbringing. And we talk about our personal stories, growing up a little different, growing up with skater friends and growing up in the metal scene and all these type of things and how that's evolved to us now trying to raise kids that don't mind being different and dealing with all the issues of raising kids today. So it's a very fascinating, fun, and personal conversation. I know you're going to enjoy this. And if you do enjoy this, let me remind you guys, this is a Valley for Valley show. If you get any value out of the discussions and interviews I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. You can rate, review, tell people about the show, share the show with your friends and family. My show is actually open source, so you can also share it anywhere you would like. And hopefully that helps the algorithms favor shows that they typically are suppressing. But if you are in a good financial situation, if you're in the holiday spirit, and if you can't afford to help the show out, there's tons of ways of doing so. You can send a one-time donation via Venmo or PayPal. You can support us monthly on Patreon, and we have a couple new Patreon supporters. So thank you so much for doing that. I truly appreciate it, especially during the holiday seasons when I know many people are spending money on presents and traveling and whatnot. So thank you so much for supporting the show. Thanks so much for everyone who continues to support the show and has supported the show in the past. Any help is appreciated help. And then other ways of supporting the show and also repping the show. If you're a fan of the Ripple Effect podcast and all the things I do, the Union of Unwanted, the Theory 6 Music Project, check out our merch store. Check out all the cool new designs, all the cool new logos. Big Frog, who runs our merch store, is a family-owned business. So purchasing some merch doesn't only help the Ripple Effect podcast, but you also help a family-owned business. This stuff looks amazing. It's high quality. The print is amazing. The logos look phenomenal in person. And you can find all these links in the show description or on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com, or you can go directly to the merch store by going to the rippleeffectpodcastmerch.com. Lastly, check out Theory 6 Music. It's my solo music project. I have an old EP called The Ripple Effect with a song called The Ripple Effect on there, which is the intro song to the podcast, and it inspired the name of the podcast. But since I started the show, music has kind of taken a back seat. I just couldn't find the time to write a song, structure a song, then start recording it and playing every instrument, which is what I did on the Ripple Effect EP. I sang, I played keyboards, guitar, bass. I use drum machines. I don't play drums, but I use drum machines. But I did physically make and create everything, which requires way more time than I have. But I still enjoy writing lyrics and writing songs. And in my head, I feel like I'm constantly creating new songs and new ideas. But the time it would take to turn those ideas into something you can listen to would take too much time. But luckily, I am now paying a performer to perform my music I write, and that's AI music generators. What I'm doing now is all my Theory 6 new music, I'm writing and structuring a song. Then I'm putting it in these AI music generators, putting in riffs that I like, putting in melodies I like. Then just like that, it puts together this song I told it to put together. And the cool thing is, if I don't like it, I can modify it, I can change it. I kind of just feel like I'm writing songs and then paying a musician, a artificial musician, to perform my songs. But the songs are mine, as you'll know by the lyrics and the themes of the song, and then just also comparing it to my old stuff, you will see a lot of similarities. And a lot of the songs, especially my new one, which is called Digital Disease, and I'll put it at the end of this podcast. I'll give you a little sample of it. It is about transhumanism and man versus machine and all these concepts and ideas and possible endings to our story that I might possibly be contributing to by using AI. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to write songs about the dangers of AI while using AI to help finish the songs. But either way, Theory 6 music is available everywhere, anywhere you can get digital downloads. Hopefully by the time you hear this podcast, Digital Disease, my new song, my new single, will be available everywhere. Also check out Still Remains' new song, The Wound and the Weapon. And that's it, guys. I think I've talked enough. Enjoy this amazing conversation with TJ Miller from Still Remains, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
So much for the kind words. I definitely feel like Still Remains was kind of we were doing what we were doing like almost at the wrong time, because I think that if we would have kind of came on the scene over the last like 10 years, we probably would have blown up to be a pretty big band. And I don't say that with an ego, like it is what it is, there's nothing we can do about it, and it is what it is. But thank you so much for the kind words. I mean, we love all the keyboards and the melodic stuff. It's just doing what we do. I'm a really emotional person, so all my vocals are going to be emotional because it's just kind of who I am. But man, my story is kind of different. It's a little all over the place. My parents were divorced when I was really, really little, and my mom got custody of me. My dad was more of like a conservative Christian type, and then my mom was more like drug addict, like heavy metal, MTV, party, whatever. And like early on, I remember seeing like, this was in like the early 80s, man, like like Dire Straits on MTV, the song Money for Nothing. And I remember being like so fascinated with the little super shitty looking virtual reality characters walking around. It was almost like the first like animated music video, I feel like. And I would run around the house with a pair of drumsticks, probably one of my mom's boyfriends or something. And I was gaga for music, and I kind of just consumed what I could up, through my earlier childhood. There was a lot of like Bryan Adams and like Uh, I remember seeing a lot of like Guns N' Roses and AC/DC and Poison and whatever was, bigger in the early 80s that my parents or my mom and my stepdad listened to a lot. Um, but there was a time just before I was 10 where my mom and my stepdad got divorced. So divorce number two. And I came back up to Michigan to live with my dad. And, going from kind of like being exposed to, I mean, I was already exposed to like rap and R&B and um, a lot of, kind of like radio metal and rock and things like that. Going from that to being in this like conservative Christian household where, I couldn't listen to Metallica or whatever. Like they were okay with me like listening to, like Mariah Carey or just easier things or like, if it wasn't like Christian music or something. And that was just kind of the way of it up through my early teenage years. But I remember in those times kind of discovering um some of my most important, I feel like, influences. And I don't know if this is a really big influence, but I started listening to like tapes that I had of like Elvis Presley, that kind of start showing you like the pop like song structure formulas. And it goes like verse chorus bridge chorus. And you kind of see how those vocal dynamics work. um Man, back then in the day too, it was like a lot of like Michael Jackson, Thriller. I was walking around the neighborhood listening to, pop records because it's really all I had. And um but I was in love with that stuff. I thought it was great. And you know when I was in seventh grade, I wanted to play the drums. I've always kind of liked the drums a lot, but I've never been at a point in my life to where I could get like drum lessons. And my parents didn't want me to play drums in the school band. Um, so they were just like, if you're going to do music at all, it's going to be choir. And I was just like, fuck, okay. So I was kind of bummed about that. It was either drums or saxophone I wanted to play. And so I just was like, whatever, I'll do the choir thing. I'll try that out. And I feel like after my first year, like I, discovered that I could sing well. And it was just really educational. And learning a little bit of music theory, learning how to read music, singing with a group, learning harmonies, and all of that. And um, I kind of got into it, and through high school, got way more into it. Was in like my chamber choir. I was like the only freshman boy to audition for the my school's like chamber choirs, like the varsity choir, and make it. And so I just had a blast with that. But it was like it wasn't until like later in high school, uh, maybe my like junior year, where I started hanging out with this group of kids at school that turned me on to like punk rock, and they turned me on to hardcore, and they turned me on to metal. Like I was so unaware, I was so sheltered from it. I got grounded for bringing home a Metallica record. So, what's my parents going to say about me bringing home, this Deftones album or this whatever? Um, but eventually I pushed past it. Like I got a guitar, and I was working on learning how to play guitar, and I was singing a lot. And eventually I was getting all right at guitar, and I really wanted to pursue that. But then when I started getting into the metal thing, it was like I heard a few vocalists that really really inspired me, and I was like, man, I need that's what I need to do. I heard I was in love with like Chino Moreno. I loved like the first like Limp Bizkit record. Fred Durst was just balls to the wall on that first Limp Bizkit record. Um,
They
and
never
I,
re- they never
what's that?
recreated they never recreated the sound of $3 bill, you all.
Oh, they never will either. No,
Yeah, no,
they got they don't need to though. They got too much money. They can just do whatever. They can have people write their songs for them if they want.
yeah, yeah, and
But
that's something I definitely want to get into after is some of the ghostwriting and then AI and all these other things that are changing the music industry. But yeah, I don't want to derail you. So yeah,
No,
continue.
that's all right.
It's fascinating.
But like I heard some more like extreme vocalists. Like the one that got me was Dan Wayand, and he sings for a band called Zayo. And he was really like the dude that I heard that it scared the shit out of me. And I was just like, this dude has had such an impact on me, like emotionally, when I listen to, how does music have that effect on somebody where you can hear something and it psychologically kind of like fucks you up, it freaks you out, and I kind of liked that feeling, and I was like, I want to be able to do that. And so I started screaming. Dude, I don't have like a massive like I'm not a metalhead per se, like I wasn't raised on, you know uh I wasn't raised on,
Baden and yeah,
yeah, like Iron Maiden. I wasn't raised on like Celtic Frost and fucking Obituary and things. I mean, a
King
lot of that stuff
Diamond.
I've heard over the years and is great, but like I remember doing like interviews when we were first like on Roadrunner, and they wanted to talk about all these like classic metal bands, and I'm just like, dude, you're talking wrong, dude. I have no clue about this stuff, like I just heard a sound that I loved, and I just went for it. So that was really it. Now I'm more into it. Super into bands like Converge, and they're probably like my favorite metal band. I like the noisier like aspect of metal. I don't really like the side of metalcore that Still Remains is on, because it's really melodic, it's really produced, it's all of these things. I like the like raw, noisy, pissed off, chaotic stuff.
Which is probably why you like punk in the beginning, because that's kind of similar thing. It wasn't about like being overproduced or being a amazing musician per se. It's more about the feeling you get.
Exactly. I need something to make me feel something. And
Yeah.
really that's why I'm a big Radiohead fan. Like I love Radiohead. It just makes me feel all sorts of things when I listen to it. And I you know, I hope that someday I could be some sort of an artist that makes people feel, have different feelings, or whether it's fear or sadness or redemption or whatever.
Well, that's why even with a lot of the deathcore or death metal bands that I would listen to, it was always something like I would dibble dabble in the genre, but it was never really my favorite genre because a lot of the screaming was for the sake of screaming. It's like that's what their genre does, and that's how their genre sounds. So it didn't give me the same emotional impact as like bands like Still Remains, where like it always seemed like you were screaming with for a purpose because it complemented the lyrics, it complemented the feel of the song. So you felt something, right? Instead of
Yeah.
just like, screaming because that's what death metal bands do. And there are some bands, of course, exceptions to the rule. What's it, Beneath a Burning Sky? They're not around anymore, but I forget what the name of the band is. They had a really good deathcore album that really like he screamed like with passion. And then you get bands like or current bands like Fit for a King. Like I love his screaming style, that like screeching, screaming style where it just sounds passionate and it sounds, at parts it sounds passionate, at other parts it sounds like a demon. It just I love that aspect of it. But yeah, it's amazing how one thing that can have a serious impact and emotional response to one person, somebody else could think is shit. So everything, all the bands we're talking about, somebody could listen to and be like, I don't get what emotional response you're talking about because I just think it's trash. It's so funny how subjective music is.
Yeah, it's very subjective for sure.
Yeah. So you're not one. You're not the only one that like artists that you talk to that you would assume what their flavor of choice is for music. A lot of times these bands, I think even some of the Deftone guys, like they had some. I remember seeing interviews in the past, like they had some weird interests in music, but it's cool because you can those. I'm sure all those influences end up affecting and having a positive influence on your singing style, your music, and the band in general, right?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if like any of my influences like have like impacted the way that I sing, or like how I sing, but it might impact me more like lyrically, or inspire me to, sing more passionately, things like that. But I kind of always just try to stay true to what my voice I mean, it's just is TJ. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna start yarling to try to sound like Eddie Vedder or like,
It's
I,
funny.
I kind of have a raspy voice. I'm not gonna try to clean it up. It's
Yeah.
just gonna come out and sound the way it does.
Yeah, Max Cavalera would say that. I remember people asking him to sing, and he's like, I can't sing. He's like, this is the way I sing. He's like, it
Yeah.
just is the, so how did the band come together? How did you meet your bandmates, and were they different in backgrounds in regards to influences and music genres that they were into? And then what was the vision of the band? Did you guys have, like, was it discussed, like, hey, we kind of want to mix these genres, we want to do some, or did it just organically come about? You're jamming. How did that all happen?
Well, the first like incarnation of Still Remains had a bunch of different members in it. But like earlier on, like Jordan and Zach and I, like guitars, keyboard, and myself were all together. And but we were in a band before Still Remains together as well. So we were already kind of like vibing on a lot of the same bands and things. And I think that when our first band broke up, we wanted to start this, and the goal was to just make it serious or more serious. Like we wanted to play more. We wanted to try to get more opportunities. Our first band was called Shades of Amber, and that, we played around a lot, but I don't know if, half of us wanted to kind of bring it to the next level, so
That's
we
so
formed Still
funny.
Remains. What's that?
I was gonna say that it's people do not realize how hard it is to get a bunch of artistic, opinionated people who have visions, who are passionate about their work together, and then keep them together. Like
Yeah.
you have some that don't, that aren't as passionate. Other people have different visions. It's when you see bands that are together for long term, it's like it's amazing because I mean all the personality. I mean, artistic people are typically very passionate about their work, which means that like you're working with other very passionate people, and
Yeah.
there's some butting of heads for for good reason because everybody really cares about the product.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I don't really think it's super important that everybody has like the same like musical influences, just as long as everybody's passionate about, or at least on the same page about what's being created, and then we can all put our own personalities into it in different ways. So like I think Jordan and AJ are probably more locked in with some of the things that they listen to, and really they're kind of like the two of the more primary songwriter, and Zach too. Zach writes riffs too. Our keyboard player, he writes songs. Um, but they're kind of more in tune on the musical front. I think Mike and I are probably more in tune on the vocal front with things that he and I kind of listen to. I don't think neither of us listen to like a ton of like metalcore and stuff like that. But it's like, we know what this band is, we know what this band does, and if I hear a piece of music that those guys provide, it's like I know what I need to do, or either that or the song tells me what it needs.
And that's a hard thing to do too, is just only do what the song needs. And
Yeah.
because people will, we were talking about this before, like these songs and these artists that have emotional responses to a person listening. And I always say, like, some of your favorite songs, some of your the songs that affect you the most emotionally, either with energy or sadness or anger or whatever, they're usually pretty easy songs, like to play or sing along to or whatever. The real complex songs, sometimes you're overdoing it, right? You're doing it for the sake of kind of showing, your ego gets in the way a little bit, where you're like trying to do it not because it benefits the art, but you're doing it because it benefits your ego, and you get to show off how good of a musician or artist you are.
Yeah, and I feel like I can see that, or I can at least hear it when I listen to certain bands, or when I hear certain things. I tend to not like gravitate toward bands that are more gimmicky, or like, hey, check this out, I'm gonna shred in a new sort of different way, and it's gonna have a bunch of like beat boops and weird sonic sounds, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know. I just want to hear a song. I don't care about the gimmicks and all the special bells and whistles that you're going to throw into it. I just want, I don't know. I just want something more organic, I guess.
Yeah, well, your new track is badass. Speaking of somebody who doesn't listen to metalcore, it's probably one of you know, just coolest, baddest new song I've heard in a while, and
Thank you.
super catchy. It's awesome because it's this is one of the hardest things to do, and I've had Mike Martin from All That Remains on. He's actually from the same town I'm from in Massachusetts, and we talk about this, all the time about how you get these artists or you get these fans that like if you keep the same sound, they complain that your every album sounds the same, and if you change your sound, then they get mad that you change your sound. But
Yeah,
the sometimes what you guys did with the new track is that it's different, but still has the DNA of Still Remains. Like it's right.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that we're very conscious of that. I mean, and that's why we wanted to work with Lee Albrecht, our producer, because it's like, all right, how do we how do we kind of like do what we do? We're a straight up, melodic metalcore band, and but it's like the challenge is like how can we present our sound with kind of more of a current vibe, like it's like we don't want to change who we are, but we want to be able to kind of cater to a lot of like newer metalcore fans and the younger people that are listening, and as well as like all of our like old fans that were hardcore about the band. So it's like, all right, we know this needs to be brutal, it needs to be melodic, and it needs to have the harmonies, and it needs to have the signature like Jordan Whalen riffs and the keyboards and whatever. But what can we do to make this different? So we're like, we're going to speed up the tempo. We are gonna we're gonna make this like, like a thrash song. We don't typically like, we're more of like a mid-tempo metal band. We don't go like super duper fast. So it's like, all right, we're gonna breathe some new life into this fucking thing. We crank the tempo. I tried to challenge myself just by just listening to what the song is telling me, and I'm like, all right, I need lyrically, I need more words. I need to be able to just like spit this out, and it just, I don't know, it just all kind of made sense. And Lee's pretty plugged in, and he's got great ideas too, and it was just like a perfect kind of marriage between us wanting to write a new EP and picking the right producer. Honestly, I mean, he was a huge help to help us push forward with this.
Yeah, and I highly recommend everybody checking out the new song. It's on your YouTube channel, which I'll put the links in the show description, and wounds and the wound
The,
and the weapon.
Yep, The Wound and the Weapon. It's on every streaming format you can probably have access to. Got a new video on YouTube for it, and yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome track. I highly recommend people checking it out. And
Thanks. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun song.
yeah, it's yeah, you could definitely, it's a fun listen. It's like you said, it was when I listen to it, I'm always intrigued with like when bands come out with like new tracks and they've been around for a while because it's like your expectations are always high, right? Because it's like if you love a band, you're always like, oh, this song better be sick because in my head I'm like they're gonna, and then it comes out and you're like, dude, this song is exactly what I wanted. Literally, I'm like, this is exactly what I was hoping for. It's more of the same but in a new way and
Yeah.
slightly different, So yeah, that's so let's rewind a little bit. I am curious. So how did you because people like me, I'm 40. I grew up, I was when you guys when I learned about you guys, I was just out of high school. I've always been into the two genres. I always like anything that kind of goes against the grain and is different. So I used to look for subgenres and get, look for just really interesting bands that were doing interesting things. And I still do that now. I don't listen to a whole lot of music from, I grew up listening to. I'm always trying to find like, hey, I was a young, passionate kid who wanted to play music. Like, what's the young, passionate kids of this time doing? How are they pushing the boundaries? What are they up to? Like I'm always intrigued with that type of stuff. But you guys were the young, passionate kids pushing the boundaries at one time.
Yeah.
How, what, like how, at the time it wasn't as acceptable or it wasn't as common to hear keyboards and synths and whatnot. in metal. And even metalcore sound of like kind of breakdowns and stuff wasn't that common either. You had, you had bands like Poison the Well and others that, did a bit of it. But like the way you guys did it, like it was just at that time, I'm not sure anybody really did it like you guys. And, I, like I said in the beginning, like I give you guys a lot of credit. And I'm sure there's always some buddy listening to the show who's like, you don't know about this band. They were doing it, it's like you always get that. But in my world in my, CD collection, that was one of the first ones that I'm like, wow, dude, this is such a badass sound. And the way you guys would mix, synth, all the things I love, like catchiness, harmonies, melodies with breakdowns with I'm like, this is like my favorite type of music. This is like a mixture of everything. How did that happen?
It just kind of happened by chance. Like it wasn't really super calculated because it's like on the one hand you got a guy like Jordan Whalen who back when we were younger, he was like when I met Jordan, he played bass. He's a mean bass player. His older brother plays bass too. He's great. But he was playing it in like the church band, and but he was like he had these like black dreads. He wore this like blue like kind of bandana. He had these baggy pants, and he wore his bass really low. He's like this total like punk rock bass player, and he was just like just shredding. Well, he picked up the guitar eventually, and then of course, he's just shredding on the guitar because for him it just makes sense. He's a shredder. So he was starting to write all these riffy songs and stuff, and he and I we were both into a lot of the same like heavy bands back in the day, like Zao, Living Sacrifice, kind of more on the like Solid State Records end of things, because that's the stuff we could kind of get away with listening to, being raised in these like Christian households and stuff. So he was just coming up with stuff, and then vocally, lyrically, whatever. I'm like a screaming vocalist, but I almost have these like aspirations of pop music as far as structuring or writing melody and choruses and harmonies and things like that. So I'm just doing what I know over what he's giving me. You know what I mean? And it was sounding really cool. Just like the earlier like songs. And there was this one point, still very very early on, within like the first year or two of the band being together, where we were a five piece and we didn't have keyboards yet. And so Zach, our keyboard player, he had played drums in our previous band, Shades of Amber, and then he went on to play keyboards in this more like kind of like nerd rock band called Joust. They were kind of like Nada Surf or Weezer or whatever. And he had great stage presence, and he's a great musician. So like everything he was playing was really cool. And there was one point where like Jordan and I heard we were jamming some stuff by like In Flames and Soilwork, and some of these bands that we kind of heard through like watching like CKY, like those crazy like pre-Jackass videos of Bam Margera, and like he'd put like Children of Bodom or like Dimmu Borgir and his, he'd edit that music in. We were like, holy shit, this stuff is super heavy, it's chuggy, it's riffy, but oh my God, you hear those keyboards? And then we were like, all right, we need to see if maybe we can have Zach play keyboards on one song just to see what it'll sound like. So we were like, hey dude, like we were buddies with Joust, we'd play shows together. Still Remains and Joust would play shows together. Like half of that band used to be in a band with me and Jordan, but we would play shows together all the time, even though like the music wasn't similar. We were just friends, and the shows were always packed out. There were, in the earlier, 2000s here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, there was a place called Skeletones, and anytime that either band would play, it was just like packed. Like it was this place that did like free shows. You just had to buy like a coffee or whatever, or a Jones soda or whatever, and then the owner would let you in for free to watch the music. And so he was providing this place for like this almost like safe place for young kids to go to get like their fill of music. They could learn about music and kind of like start this music scene here in Grand Rapids. And so anyway, aside from that, like we were like, hey, that's a good idea. Let's ask Zach if he wants to try one song. So we were writing this song called The Task. It was one of our like very first songs, maybe like the fourth or fifth song we ever written or something. I don't know. It was, or maybe that's probably bullshit. Maybe it was like the 10th song we wrote or something. But he came in and he was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And he tracked the keys on it, and we were just listening back going like, this just never heard anything that we've done so far that has sounded more perfect. And so we had more talks, and we were like, we would go play these shows, and Zach would come up for like one song, and then he would play with Joust. He would just play with us on the one song. And Jordan and I were like, we gotta just see if he'll do some more, or whatever. And so we kind of talked to him, and he started kind of writing keys to like the songs that we had already written and whatever. And then, it was like, well, do you just want to join our band? We're trying to put these like short tours together and really kind of do this and get noticed and whatever. And he thought about it for a bit. And it was unfortunate because he kind of had to quit Joust. And, we love those guys and they were our friends. So it was like, kind of felt bad, but it's like, who else are we going to ask? Like, he's the guy, and he was into it. He ended up joining, and it just went from there. So it just kind of happened the way it happened, and it wasn't this like pre-calculated thing where we had this sound all figured out that we wanted to do. It was like we were just kind of in this discovery mode, little by little, as we would write songs, and eventually we acquired a keyboard player, and from there is where things really kind of started to happen.
Yeah, because and you brought up two bands who aren't from America. At the time, those type of sounds did exist, but a lot of it was overseas, and I don't
Yeah,
know why, but it seemed like any band that was experimenting with keyboards and metal and that type of sound was, like you said, a Soilwork, In Flames, these bands.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so let me recorrect my initial statement. What made you guys unique was, one, I think you guys are very different than those bands. I think that obviously you're different, but even the experimenting with the sounds, you were the first band from America that I knew that really did that. I mean, there was some other, some of the new metal bands like Crossbreed. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're from like Florida. They
Mhm.
they were really experimental too, like a lot of synths, and like it was a combination of like new metal and electronic and synths and whatnot. And they were, I think they got together like mid 90s, late 90s or something like that. But there wasn't like your sound. And it's funny because what you said is absolutely correct, even with the Christian aspect of it. If you guys came out 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you might be one of the biggest metalcore bands of the scene. You might be a Devil Wears Prada. You might be a, Under Oath, because you had, maybe the Christian appeal because of the background of that. And then obviously the sound and everybody. But I always say like the bands who did it because that was them, not because they're trying to fit into a genre. Those are the bands who stick around, and they're the albums that you still listen to 20 years later, 40 years later. So yeah, that's fascinating. So how much of obviously, you can share what you want, and if it's too personal, it's too personal. But how much of your upbringing influenced your lyrical, your songs lyrically, any trauma, any of that type of stuff? Because obviously for many of us, like, writing is our therapy, and but the concern is also I'm sharing my most interpersonal thoughts with the public. So
Yeah.
was that a factor?
Oh, my upbringing is still, to this day, I'm 43 years old, but my upbringing and family chaos and things like that contribute to, I would say, like probably 90% of my lyrics. And I don't think it was quite as prevalent earlier on. But probably I started kind of getting more into that, like in Of Love and Lunacy, but really a lot more on the Serpent, and then Ceasing to Breathe had some too, and this new EP is 100%, 1000% about family and like shit. So you know what I mean? It's yeah, it's a lot, man. Like I tend to write and I don't know if it's just a therapeutic thing or what, but I don't tend to really I don't feel like I'm inspired to write quite as much unless I'm writing from a place of pain. And it's unfortunate, but like when I have those certain scenarios that happen, those are the things that cause me to put pen to paper.
Yeah, and I think we do it because it is therapy, because it makes you feel better. And some of the most interesting and people really just like sincere people are people who write, because you aren't this person who's just going along with the chaos of the day and not even thinking about your actions or reactions, or how you could have been nicer in one interaction with this person or whatnot. Like, there are people who really do spend time thinking about their lives and reflecting, and especially living in the East Coast, there's very little reflecting done in the chaotic lifestyles that people live here. It's like, got to go pick up the kids, got to go to the grocery store, got to go to the gym, got to go to, nobody ever stops and it's like, hey, maybe I should have held the door for that person. Or maybe, when my wife called me, maybe if I wasn't such a jerk, I wouldn't have got so much attitude back, and just,
Yes.
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
And it's so you're writing, and well, that was another thing I was going to ask you about, because the new song is kind of heavy. You do see bands in time. It's not just heavy, like you said. It's also faster tempo than we're used to. In time, it seems like bands struggle to sometimes tap into that same type of anger and energy that created some of the earlier heavy stuff. You don't you do It does sound like you can't tap into it as often as you do when you're a young energetic kid, but it seems like it's still there. You could still tap into it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we all still love music a lot and we love to create. And I think that over the years, we've had massive sections of time where we've kind of like not hung out so much and we've kind of taken a break from either doing this stuff or seeing each other or whatever. And now that everybody's like married and has kids and whatever, it's like when we get together, it almost feels really special. And there's like this new like excitement with the band, whether there's music or not. I think we all just have gotten to a point where we really enjoy being around each other, and I think you can actually hear that, especially in this new EP. Like it's just got this energy that I don't feel like any of our past material has quite harnessed. You'll see when it comes out. I think it'll knock your socks off.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear it and for the release. And yeah, it's funny how when we get older, like there's certain things we take for granted, like you're so busy, before you used to hang out with your buddies all the time. And then when you can't because you're too busy, like it becomes a luxury, right?
Yeah,
Like, oh wow, we actually found time to get together and hang out or whatever. And
yeah,
and that's kind of one of the nice things about getting older too, is we're similar age, you're 43, I'm 40. And, I have a lot of friends that are a little younger, a little older, and they're like, oh, getting old sucks. And and I'm always like, getting old. Sorry, my Pro Tools just popped the error real quick. Give me
that's all right.
um, but I'm like, the nice thing about getting old is that you can figure out what's important. You figure out you figure out the people you need to filter out, because they're bringing negative energy to your life, the people that you want to spend more time with. You stop caring about everybody's opinion a little bit.
Yeah,
And all those things. I always say, like, I've been doing this podcast since 2013. I don't read comments barely ever. And it's just, I tell other podcasts, I'm like, why? What do you, I'm like, do what you love, and some people are gonna love it, some people are gonna hate it, but as long as you're enjoying doing it, I'm like, that's the most important thing.
yeah. I think that's really important too. I try not to read too many comments. Granted, when you don't put music out too often, it is kind of cool to read some of them and hear how stoked everybody is. Um, but like when you're in a band and you're touring all over the place, you have these moments where you're like, yeah, I need a break. I need to take a break. And then and I think after you do it for so long, it just becomes so exhausting. But like when you have so much of a break, or you go from being like a full-time touring band to a band like us that doesn't tour full time, and we only kind of do things like when it really makes sense for us, or on special occasions or whatever, it really does make the occasion like really special. Because like how many of your friends, or even my friends, like if I get together with a group of friends that aren't Still Remains, like we always have like the best time. But like if I can get together with those dudes, and I wouldn't have said this like 10 years ago because I'm an old curmudgeon-y, emotional, up and down guy, where I'm just like, I just need a break, blah, blah, blah. But I can say like these days, when I get together with Still Remains, like we are excited because like how many other friends do we have that like we've actually like traveled the world with, and like honestly seen some like super ridiculous shit with. Like you can only imagine that like some of the like hilarity that ensues like on a tour bus, like after you play, you know what I mean? And no, there's no like debauchery with Still Remains or anything, but like these guys are just some of the most hilarious human beings, like on if not just in my town, like on the planet. So like may they're all so unique and hilarious in their own ways. And we've spent a lot of time together, we've traveled a lot together, and so like when we do come together to do this sort of thing, it's extra special. It's extra special, even just to hang out or have like a Christmas get together, or whatever, even with our wives and our kids. Like it's it's awesome. It's just so cool. So
Yeah,
I can't verbalize. I have a hard time verbalizing the excitement that we're all feeling. And I think the camaraderie we're all feeling, and the appreciation that we all have for each other at this point.
yeah. Well, I always say like the reason why firefighters or policemen or professional athletes or bands have like a unbreakable bond is because you go through a lot of shit together and you depend on each other. And
Yeah.
when you go through those journeys together, the ups and the downs all contribute to why it's important and why it's something that's really important and an important chapter in your life and whatnot. And life's yin and yangs, right? Like you need the downs to appreciate the ups and vice versa. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, when you and the thing is people forget too, like so you're a little older than me. I was listening to you guys right out of high school. I graduated in '03. Barely graduated in '03. And so you guys were like in your early 20s touring, and of course kids are going to make mistakes. Like you're going to party a little too much, you're going to drink a little too much, you're going to do that type of stuff. You don't have parents, right, touring with you telling you what to do or what not to do. How was that, like going on the road? And did you for the most part stay out of trouble compared to the average metal guy going on tour in this?
Yeah, yeah. I think Still Remains really kind of minded our P's and Q's. The real thing was just that there might have been a little bit of excess drinking here and there, but that's really it. There's no drugs, there was no women, things like that. So it was just kind of like music, and you're in the van, and then we try to party afterwards. And which always was very tough for me because I was raised by a complete alcoholic, and I've seen a lot of crazy shit. So I was often kind of secluding myself away from some of the partying. Um, and I think it really bothered me like early on. But when I look back at it now, it's like it doesn't bother me thinking about it, because if I had the kind of if I had a different upbringing, it would have been much easier for me to hang out. And I don't think that those guys were doing anything harmful at all. They're literally just like young guys got the chance to go on tour with their band, like, and they're just having fun. That's it. You know, there wasn't any like, it's not like they're getting drunk and try to set fire to a hotel or something, or try to like walk into a store and steal a bunch of shit or whatever. Like, not that anybody really does that, but like, everybody was just trying to have a good time.
Yeah, they're
That's
doing
really it.
the same thing. They're doing the same thing every early 20s and, kids doing their 20s. The only difference is they're
Exactly.
doing it on tour or on a bus or, backstage or whatever it may be.
They're
Uh,
just excited. They're stoked to hang. They want to party. They're stoked, they're celebrating. It makes
yeah.
sense.
And when there's not a lot else to do, why not? That's the problem too. It's like, besides playing your show, like you do have a lot of downtime. And I always say like bored kids get in trouble, not busy kids.
Yeah,
When you're bored, you end up coming up with, there's no such thing as a bad idea. You come up with ridiculous things. Yeah. So that's it. It is amazing though with the alcohol thing because it's same thing with gambling. It's same thing with like there's people who can do it and can do it from time to time. It doesn't affect their life at all, and others will do it and it completely consumes their lives.
yeah.
And you ever hear of the rat park experiment?
Mm-mm.
I've talked about this in the past on the show, so my apologies for people who've heard me refer to this multiple times. But so for a longest time, people talk about addiction as like, oh, this thing is addictive, this substance is addictive, alcohol is addictive, this and that. So they had this experiment where they had these rats and they put, I think it was cocaine in one water, and the other water didn't have cocaine. It kept coming to the one with cocaine. Eventually, it died. And they're like, hey, look, cocaine's addictive. So and then these Canadian scientists and psychologists are like, well, one thing you're not taking consideration is the cage. It's in a cage. Like, let's try to create its natural habitat and see what happens. So they created this thing called Rat Park, where they took this giant warehouse and they recreate its natural habitat with like places to play, places to eat, other rats to hang out with, and they recreate the same experiment. One water had cocaine, the other one didn't. It came to the water once, went away, it didn't come back. And then like, what did we learn from this? We learned that it was a internal issue. It wasn't a external substance issue. What made the rat want to come back wasn't the fact that cocaine was addictive per se. It was the fact that it was unhappy. And we're pleasure monkeys, and we're constantly looking for things that bring us pleasure. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't have pleasure in other places of its life, and the substance gives it fills that emptiness. It's going to keep coming back. And I remember telling the story to a buddy of mine who went to UMass. I never went to college, but he did, and he was telling me about some of the parties, and he was saying how one of his buddies, they were at a party. They did a little cocaine. They kind of got peer pressured into it. And he was honest. He was like, yeah, I got peer pressured into it. And he's like, I tried it. He's like, I never liked it. And then he's like, and that was it. That was the only time I ever did it. He's like, my buddy, he's like, started doing it more and more and more. He was telling me, he's like, and now reflecting on that situation after hearing about Rat Park, he's like, I was in a stable relationship with a girl. He's like, I was, a great relationship with my parents. Basically my life was pretty sturdy and solid, and everything was going good. And he was at a crossroads. He didn't know what he was going to college for. He hated his parents, didn't have a girlfriend, and he's like, it kind of makes sense. He didn't do it more often after that incident because cocaine was more addictive to him. It was because he needed it more than the other guy, to fill that emptiness. So it's
Absolutely.
you would agree with that, no, with your just personal experiences with the.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've gone through a lot of therapy myself. So, I mean, I understand the kind of like vicious cycle of addiction and what we do to kind of like heal trauma. And, it's really stuff like that is just kind of like a temporary, it's like a band-aid, But yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, well, what they don't tell you either is that like exercise is great for anxiety and depression. Changing your diet. It's like we're constantly poisoning ourselves. We're like telling people to, hey, work a job you hate,
Yep.
that's unfulfilling, and eat some, full of preservative, fake food, and then just live in a synthetic world, stare at a blue screen all day, and that is constantly just creating this serotonin dump. And then when you're depressed because you're really unfulfilled, take our pills. And that's literally
Take our pills. Yeah.
it's wild. And that's where music, it was, and many people have said this, but um and some I'm sure don't. I know a girl who literally does not listen to music in the car. She doesn't listen to anything. She's okay with getting in the car with no sound and driving to her destination. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing ever. This is like an alien to me. I'm like, I always have music playing. It's either a podcast or music, but something's always playing. And but for me, like music, if I didn't have music, especially during those early days of my life, or my young life, becoming a man and adolescence times, like I don't know what I would do, because I was, a little of my background, and the listeners know this, but I was born in Portugal, in northern Portugal, and my parents were farmers. We came to America when I was 4, and so my parents kind of let me listen to whatever I wanted to, because they didn't know any better. They didn't
Yeah.
know that, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be like a teenager listening to Cannibal Corpse or Napalm Death or Slayer or whatever, and because they didn't care. They were just going. They're immigrants just going to work, and they didn't have time to for anything else. But like being able to listen to that dark and depressing music, it was like, wow, man, like somebody else feels the way I feel. Like,
Yes.
and you always get people who are like, I remember growing up, and I'm sure you got this a lot too. They're like, why do you want to listen to sad music? Why do you want to listen to angry music? Why do you want to listen to sad? I'm like, because sometimes I feel those emotions, and so do you. And when you know that somebody else is feeling the same thing, I'm like, you don't feel as alone. You don't feel
You
as
don't feel as alone, and some of that can help you just release some of that. Like exactly. And I've told a bazillion people that when I'm writing music, or when I'm on stage, or when I'm creating or whatever, that's kind of a goal, like I want people to be able to listen to where they say, like, I'm not alone, this guy went through it, like, and they can sing along if they want, and it can mean something to them, it can help them through whatever they're dealing with.
That's what I always loved about music. You go to a concert and you see people that are tall, short, Asian, Europeans, you see like a little bit of everything. And it's like, if you love, if you're, we're all enjoying this thing and we're enjoying it together. And a lot of times, especially in the metal world, being I just had Scott Horton on, who's antiwar.com. He's, best-selling author, really like one of a black belt in like geopolitical stuff, always on Dave Smith's show and whatnot. And but he was a skater growing up, so sometimes before we record, we're like talking about like him skateboard, because I was kind of busting his balls because he still had the chain wallet on, and I'm like, dude, I remember. I'm like, where the hell's my chain wallet? I'm like, I haven't. I'm like, it just brought back some memories, and but we were talking about like just like the skaters, the metalheads, the punks, like. We all felt like outsiders, we all felt like, but it gave us a community. And it's like just about everybody I grew up with came from like a broken home, or had some trauma they were dealing with, and like that community gave us just the family and friends and community that maybe we didn't have at home or anywhere else.
That's really what I think, that like punk and the hardcore scene, especially like the punk and hardcore scene, some, the metal scene as well, is really what it's there for, or not what it's there for, but it's really what it became, is like we're just a group of misfits. We're a big pile of misfit toys, and we're all together being misfits, and we are accepted by each other. We don't need we don't need anybody else to accept us. We feel whole the way we are, and we're just going to be who we are, and we're not going to cater to anybody else's rules, because fuck them. We don't need that. You know, that's I always felt like hardcore was like a safe place, or punk, or metal or whatever. It's just a safe place where I can go. It's like the only place I can go and actually like feel like myself, because when I go to work, or when I go to this family thing, or whatever, I feel like I'm either being stared at by 15 out of 20 people in the room, just feel super uncomfortable, out of place, whatever. But if I'm on stage, or if I'm at a show or whatever, I just feel like this is where my element is. The music, the camaraderie, the hugs, the hangs, the loud, the loud music, and the chaos. It just feels right at home. And I don't know if that's because there was so much chaos in my life earlier on, but it's where I go to meet up with people that are just like me, you know?
And that's the cool thing about art, music, comedy, whatever it is. Like, instead of if you're different, instead of being made fun of, we're celebrating it. Like, it's we watch my wife and I watch Kill Tony from time to time, and Kill Tony. I don't know if you ever watched the show, but they a bunch of comedians. Tony Hinchcliffe has the show where he gets all these people just put their name in a bucket, and he gets like these names out, and then whoever it may be has to come out and give a minute, and and then he has professional comedians kind of analyzing it or whatever. But the people that sign up for this stuff, like, you get people who are physically disabled, you get people who are mentally disabled, you get like all types, and it's like, if you're funny, nobody cares, and they're laughing and they're cheering them on, and everybody like becomes even a bigger fan of you if you're different, if you're overweight, if you look kind of weird. And I'm like, and I remember telling my wife, I'm like, this is what I love about comedy, this is what I love about music. I'm like, being different doesn't fucking matter. It actually
Be
almost makes you
yourself.
cooler.
Yeah. Just be yourself.
Yeah, that's how do you tell kids that now? Because it's as a parent, like, do you struggle with with maybe getting kids to understand that life lesson?
Um, I don't know. Like with our kids, we kind of let them be who they are, you know? And I think that maybe it is kind of a struggle because like in doing so you see some of the same pains that they experience that we experience as kids. I mean, you know, my daughter's 13 and she likes, you know, alternative music. She's like super into Billie Eilish and she's really into, you know, like Radiohead. She likes Nirvana. She likes you know, she's just kind of all over the spectrum and she kind of dresses the part as well. She just kind of wears whatever she wants. She's into anime, she's whatever. And when she goes to school, she's not a jock or a prep like everybody else at her school. And so like her and her friends all get picked on and it sucks. But it's like I want her to just be who she is. I don't want her to feel like she's got to like go to school and be Miss Popular. You know what I mean? I just want her to be who she is, whoever her little self is, and go to school. It's the same thing with our little guy. You know, like he's almost 10, and we want him to be you know, his individual self too. He's different. He's more into sports and stuff. So I think that maybe he's gonna click, but it's like you just kind of gotta let their own true personalities sprout and grow and flourish. You know, so it's like, hey, I don't know like much about that, but hell, if that's what you're into, we're sure as hell going to support you and make sure that you're thriving in that world. So, you know, we plug him into soccer. He's going to play baseball this fall, and you know, he's got buddies that are into the same stuff, and it's a different world, but like that's who he is. It's who he wants to be. So it's all good.
Yeah, and it's funny how later in life, hopefully, many adults, they look back at their childhood and they're like, "Oh, that kid that I thought was, weird is making some cool shit, or doing
Yeah,
some cool things." And you can kind of, I mean, it's hard because when you're a kid and you can't. When I was growing up, I was the same thing. I was a skater, a metalhead. I mean, I hung out with a lot of different groups of kids, but they're all like the outcasts, and I like that. But then I also played basketball. I got into basketball later in life, soccer, because I'm Portuguese and it's against our religion to not like it,
not play soccer. Yeah,
to not play soccer. But I didn't get into that. I kind of rebelled against organized sports at a young age because I was different. I loved metal. I loved industrial music. And I was different. And then I'm like, hey, the fucking jocks are assholes. I'm
yeah,
like, so I don't want to play sports. Fuck them,
yeah, yeah.
And
I can relate to so much of that. I
yeah.
really can. I think it's important though with children, um, you know, especially for a guy like me that's kind of gone through that whole thing growing up and wanting my kids to just be who their authentic selves are is like you have to make sure to have those conversations with your children that like I mean with my daughter it's like I hate what you're going through, you know, but it's like you want to instill in them to not judge others if they're different. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that and I say we, is me and my wife, are more like artistic types. We're more into music and going to concerts and weird eclectic decor styles and whatever else. Like, we try to tell our son, who's more into athletics, like you can absolutely do this, but it's important that you are not bullying or judging kids that are different from you, whether they're a different, they like music, or they're just a different race, if they're a different color than you, or if they dress different than you, if they have a different family style than you do. Like, lift them up, be a friend, you know like, we need to come together. And that's one thing that we talk to our kids about too. So, try to promote that whole, um I don't know, just try to promote peace for these generations, because kids still go through it. We saw so much like violent bullying growing up, and whatever. So much, and kids are still shitty. There's still so much of that around. But I think it's important. I mean, if you listen to this podcast, or if you've got children, whether you're into sports, you're into hunting and fishing, you're into hiking, you're into music, whatever, uh, just try to raise your kids with some love in their hearts and some empathy. You know, like, just because a kid looks different doesn't mean they're either, bad, or they're going to hell, or they don't belong, or, they should be treated violently, or mean, or whatever. It's just, I think that we all just need to try harder to live in harmony with one another, just despite our differences. Sorry to go off on a tangent, but like, thinking about like the children, and kind of where I came from, and seeing what they deal with out in the world today, is like, just want to do everything we can as parents to try to promote, more harmony.
Yeah, especially it's funny because later in life, I got really into playing sports and coaching, and wanted to be involved with my kids, so I coach them in basketball and soccer, and
That's awesome.
and just try to. I want to, I know I have limited time where dad's cool, eventually they're not going to want to be with dad, so I'm like trying to embrace it as much as I can,
Good.
and but the cool thing, one thing that I've seen a lot in coaching sports is that sometimes you get a kid who's like not quite as good, or doesn't listen as much, or is a little different, and and I was that kid. So like when a lot of coaches are like, "Oh, don't waste any time on Billy. Like he's not going to make it. He's not, he sucks or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, I'm like he seems to like it, and he seems like a good kid." I'm like, "You know what? Let's just try to see if we can make him a better player by the end of the season than he was when he started the season."
Yeah.
Let's,
Get him more comfortable with his teammates. Make sure you're talking to him. Maybe he's just got to come out of his shell. He needs to be inspired to, like, bust his ass.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite quotes is a good coach can change a game, a great coach can change a life. And we talk about this all the time about how when we're kids, like there was adults in our lives, and I remember, I could name a handful of them that had a little conversation with me, had a little, gave me a little tip, or maybe just talked to me about something personal. That to that adult, like they probably don't remember that conversation. It was just one of many. It just happened and they moved on. But for some reason, it stuck with me forever. And I never take for granted that any interaction I'm having with a kid, like I could be that adult, and that interaction could be that advice or that conversation that sticks with them and has a positive effect on them. And I think kids do need more mentorships. They need more people who are giving them advice, looking after them, somebody just to listen to, whatever's on their mind.
Yeah.
Uh, I always say there's like two types of people. There's people who listen and people wait for their turn to talk. And there's a lot of people who just wait for their turn to talk and don't
Yeah.
actually listen. And it's just like, listen, I just sometimes you just need it. And again, like writing is kind of a similar type of a release where you're like, you feel like just talking about it or writing it down. Like it's some way, it's like internal, it's just building up, and you need to find a way to get it out. And if
You
it's
do.
performing it, if it's whatever, and if it's exercise, like you need something. Like I feel like everybody has this internal tension. It's just like, whatever negative thing that happens that might have made you mad or whatever, like everything builds and builds and builds. And if you don't have an outlet, if you don't have something, then you end up blowing up on somebody, right? You end up being
Yes.
that asshole, and I remember playing basketball at this gym, and there's this kid that him and I would always butt heads, like, and just every single time, I'm like, oh fuck, he's back, he's here. I'm like, I'm gonna guard him, he's gonna guard me. I'm like, it's gonna get physical, he's gonna talk shit, this and that. And then one day I was talking to this older guy who plays there, who knew his mother, and we're talking about. I'm like, dude, what's up with this freaking attitude, dude? He's always in a bad mood. Always, he's like, I'll tell you why. He's like, his mom's in rehab. He's like, he doesn't know his dad. He's like, dude, that dude. He's like, he's been through some shit. And I'm like, oh, it makes sense now, And it's like he wasn't mad at me. He was just mad at the world. He's been dealt some
Yeah.
cards. And he was just pissed, and I was taking it personally, like it was something about me, and it wasn't. He was going through some shit, and he needed probably some. And then it's funny, later in time, like we became friends and we get along awesome and whatnot. But it was that's I think about that all the time. I'm like, that person who's having a bad day, that person who seems a bit of an asshole. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me hold the door for him. Let me say thank you and please and be polite and just start my own little ripple effect of positive energy and just and maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't. But I started this podcast because I do believe in the ripple effect, and
That's cool.
it's a metaphor that I wrote a song called The Ripple Effect. I'm like, oh, perfect title for the podcast. And I'm like, and I just one of those people that I truly believe in, like, hey, smiling at somebody when I walk by them, saying, sometimes my kids will be like, we'll walk by somebody, and my kids are similar age as yours, and I'll be like, hey, how are you? They're like, hey, how are you? And my daughter's always like, how do you know him? I'm like, I don't. And like, why'd you say hi to him? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, he looked at me, I just smiled, said hi. I was being polite, and it was
Because
like,
kindness goes a long way.
yeah.
Just kindness, that's it.
But another thing I always say, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. Like people always talk about my kids, oh, they're polite, I'm like, listen, I'm like, it's not, because I've never told them to be polite. I'm like, they see how I interact with people, so that's the way they assume you should interact with people, which is the correct assumption, thank God. But like it's
Yeah.
really important. You see people who are like always telling their kids to do this and that, but then they live a completely different lifestyle. And it's like, dude, no, you got to practice what you preach. You have to, your kids are a product of their environment. And if their environment's positive and they see you're eating healthy, you're treating people well, there's a very good chance they're probably going to do the same thing. Now, we have the internet today, which you're talking about bullying and whatnot. Like, at least when we got bullied, once we got out of school, we were safe. Kids can't get away from it now.
Yeah, they can't. And anytime they hop on, whatever, if they're playing like a video game or if they're online in any capacity, yeah, I feel like they can become a really, really easy target.
Dude, some of the gamers, some of the language of when
I
they're
know.
I'm like, dude, what? I'm like,
I know.
you're in your mom's basement streaming live, and you're swearing like the worst truck driver who's ever driven a truck. Like I'm just like, and then they have and it's all fake. It's not organic because they're trying to get attention. The more over the top you are, the more people want to watch it. But it is a crazy time. I don't know how much time you have, but before you go, I know I've taken up a lot of your time already.
That's okay.
And,
It's okay.
I did want to ask you about speaking of like things changing and transitioning, the future of the music industry. Like, when you came out with your first album, the one that I bought, I enjoyed popping open that CD. I didn't enjoy taking that plastic part on top because it was always a pain in the ass. I'm like, I'm gonna break this fucking CD trying to get
Yeah.
it. But eventually, when I finally got it open, I enjoyed opening it, the artwork, because I knew the band and the artist put like that was all a part of the product. That was a part of the theme, the just the whole vibe of the album. And
Yeah.
and today, now people just release singles, right? Like how do you see things transitioning? Or do you enjoy it? Have you adapted to it? Do you still, you do see records coming back a little bit, but yeah, what's your opinion on the music scene now?
Um, I've got some opinions. I mean, I in a lot of ways I like what has happened over the years. Vinyl came back in a big way over the last 10, 20 years. I became a pretty avid collector. And it's just because I feel like there's more than just the music. It's an entire piece of art. So like you get that gratification when you open it up and you can touch it and you can read it and you see the cool variants and all the color swirls on the vinyl, and then you can like, there's just like the physicality of taking it and putting it on the turntable, dropping the needle and hearing it come out of your speakers. Like, it's just like how music was, I think, originally intended to be listened to. And I think that in 2025, that is a really gratifying way to experience music even still. It's wonderful. I mean, streaming is cool because you can, it's all at your fingertips, but um, I will say that things that I don't like is that artists aren't paid anything. They're not paid for their streams. They're not paid really anything. I mean, we don't make money when we tour. We don't, it is what it is. Um, the whole AI thing is crazy. I'm in another band called Glassfield, and when AI was first starting to kind of show up more a couple of years ago, we actually we did a video that was all AI, and it was just all kind of like creepy imagery, or we did a couple of them, and then it was kind of like we weren't really thinking of the big picture. We all kind of had this conversation where like, hey, like this AI stuff, I mean, while it looks kind of weird and cool and whatever, like it's taking business away from like true artists, you know? Um, and we know so many true artists. We're true artists ourselves, and we just kind of had this come to Jesus moment where it's like, all right, moving forward, we need to make sure that we're not kind of fucking with that. And that's just that's just how we feel about it. So, the AI music, I think, needs to just go away. I think that, I think AI just needs to go away. But I also have, I, I've got some other opinions about it that I can't share. I'm not going to share. But so I don't know. Streaming's cool because it's convenient, but it doesn't do anything for the artist. Uh, I don't know. If I had my way, man, we would all be still recording records to tape and putting everything out on vinyl. So, I mean, I know that Still Remains is kind of a produced band, but we use recording software and everything else. We don't do our records to tape. We did our first EP to tape in it. That turned out really cool. But I still think that's really how bands should do it.
Yeah, so in regards to your opinions on AI, were you talking about like transhumanism or any of those the rabbit holes of just the because I mean I had this conversation with Burton C. Bell years ago when he was on, and because obviously they're a big part of their theme to their music was man versus machine, and they were way ahead of their time in regards to that. And we talked about the influences of like the Terminator movie and the Fear Factory, Terminator movie. Those were all super, just very. I don't know. It was almost like I was talking about the conversation with the adult that stuck with me. Like those things stuck with me, and because I'm always been one of those people that like I like to zoom in sometimes and really focus on one thing, but I also really like to zoom out and be like, where are we leading? Where is this road going down? And what's the end game? And AI is just advancing so quickly. Like when I released the theme song to the podcast, I did everything on live instruments. I did vocals on a microphone. I did keyboards. I used the keyboard for the MIDI. The only thing I really suck at is drums. I can't play drums, and it's too time consuming. At the time I was working full time right out of high school. I just didn't even have the time to do it, and doing everything solo is time consuming, as you know. And then just recently, not too long ago, I started I was hearing about how far AI music has gone. So I started using some softwares just to kind of see what happens. Like I would put mumble a melody that I have in my head, input the lyrics, and it would generate these amazing things. And I'm like, what the fuck? And and then you look at AI videos. Like we just watched that movie Man vs. Baby. And it's a pretty funny movie, just came out on Netflix. And Mr. Bean is the main character in it. And there was a part in the movie where I told my kids, I'm like, hey, that's the AI baby. They're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, a baby wouldn't be on top of the stairs falling like that, a real baby. I'm like, so and then I paused it and they're like, oh yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, in 2025, I'm like, that was kind of hard to pick out. Like it doesn't, and so it's like, okay, this is 2025 now in 2020, 2030, like where are we going to be? And, are we going to be even able to recognize, fake from real? There is something like what gives me a little bit of hope is the fact that there's something organic that they can't create. Like I believe in human, human energy that you can't really quantify, that you can't really understand. But when you meet a human, a physical human, there's energy there. There's something there, right? And no different than like an energy in a room when your band's playing, right? There's something you can't quantify, and that will never be able to be recreated. Also, they can't be creative. They can help take something creative and then help you bring it to life, but it still requires the person to have the imagination and the creativity and those type of skills, which I think, if you're so let me propose this to you. I actually brought this up to Scott Horton yesterday. I'm like, is using I heard the CEO of Spotify talk about this, like, he was talking about AI music. He's like, I think he was talking to another artist, and they're talking about the gap between your, what you're imagining in your head, the thing you're creating in your head, and then bringing it to life, right? And then
Yeah,
technology has always helped kind of shrink that gap, the time it takes from you to take the idea and then bring it to life. And technology's always kind of done that. And then the CEO of Spotify is like, well, these AI software programs are basically doing the same thing. They're just shrinking the gap. But because you still require imagination, you still require a vision, you still require all these things. But they were kind of comparing it to like the difference between somebody painting a circle and then somebody using graphic design software to just make the perfect circle. And
exactly.
is
Yeah.
that so? You see where the line can get blurry at
Yeah,
times?
it does get blurry. I think that AI should be used as like a helpful tool. But that line gets blurry too. It goes from being used as a tool to being used to do the entire job for you. You know what I mean? It almost takes out the human aspect of things, or even some of the creative aspect out of things. I mean, it kind of just like makes its own assumptions, and it just does all the creativity for you. I mean, you can give it a couple of sentences, and then it just does everything for you. So, um, I think we're kind of moving, and you heard your parents say it when you were a kid, like they're just going to replace everybody at these jobs. Like, it's going to get to that point. Like, I didn't really believe it when I was a kid, but now more and more, I think people are losing jobs because AI can just handle it. Certain jobs, it's easy enough to where you can just have AI do it. So yeah, I guess, right on the spot. I don't think I'm the guy with all the answers, but I think that there's something to be said for trying to use uh, to try to create to your fullest potential without it, you know. Um, and if there's gaps that need to be filled, maybe that's another human element that you can look for. Like if you're not really sure what drums to add or whatever, maybe reach out to a drum friend, or like try to program something, or you could even purchase like a stock beat off splice or something like that. And I'm not saying that I think that what you're doing with AI is bad or anything like
Oh,
that.
no, it's great. I mean, it's because I'm doing it because I still, when I started the podcast, life, and with kids, and life just gets so busy. And before I had kids, I was doing, the band broke up, and then I was doing music solo, and I started something called the Theory 6 Music Project. It was just my little solo project where I could experiment with stuff. I had Pro Tools, and I would just, I didn't know how to play drums, so I would just do everything else. Guitar, keyboards, and I always found
Yeah.
myself more of a songwriter than a you know classical musician. So I enjoyed writing songs. I loved catchiness. I loved melodies. I love uh, putting some of my trauma and my inner feelings and thoughts and anger out somewhere and then enjoying the fruits of my labor. When you get to hear, you're like, oh, this is fucking awesome. This was just up here and now it's here and I'm listening to it. And you're, you know, and then for the longest time when I started the podcast, I just, any free time I had went to the podcast. So I couldn't do music anymore. I just didn't have the time to like record everything and, you know, oh, let me record some guitar with this drum machine. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Let me record a different riff. Let me do this. Let me do, and then it just, I'm like, where do you have that time to sit down for hours? Because anytime I have time to sit down for hours, I'm recording a podcast, and I absolutely adore doing this. And so, and then with the AI thing, it was like, okay, well, I can get this, I can write lyrics, I can have this, and I can start with something so simple. I mean, I could literally grab that guitar and just play a little riff, and then put it into you know, some of the softwares that I use and be like, hey, I want to hear this with like a metalcore double bass, you know, maybe something like Fear Factory or whatever. Give it a description that kind of, you know, is machine like precision like Fear Factory. And it won't take band names, but you have to, you know, give it more specific details or whatnot. And if I know what tune I wanted, what pace, and put all that stuff in there, I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of close to what I was looking for. And then I can just adjust it, or I can take that track after and put it in Pro Tools and then layer it with keyboards and layer, you
Yeah.
know. So it's like it's a way of cutting corners. The problem is I am afraid of AI, and I there's already evidence of, I don't know if you heard the story of the AI that knew that they were gonna reboot it, like they're gonna create a new one. So it started uploading itself to like a cloud to preserve itself. There was one that like blackmailed somebody, and it was saying that it had pictures of it, you know, him with a, like his mistress or something like that. Like there's all these things, and there's that like crazy open AI story of the guy who you know, looks like he got murdered. And you know, if you listen to this show, um, people know that like that's never out of the realm of possibility. You know, some elites are trying to you know, hide something or whatever. I mean, throughout history's full of conspiracies, and we talk a lot about a lot of them here.
It's
But
only gonna get worse.
yeah. Right. So and then there's also, and then there's the spiritual aspect of it. Like, are we creating the God we've been talking about? Are we, you know, I've had shows with the doctor from the telepathy tapes, you know, which is I don't know if you're familiar with the telepathy tapes, but they had these non-autistic, nonverbal autistic kids who their parents and them could read each other's mind. And there was this doctor from Harvard, Dr. Diane Hennessy Dow, who she she basically, you know, looked into this, found out that yeah, this was happening, and that there was some type of conscious, like, so all this hippie talk, like, you know, and this spiritual talk of us all being one, like
Yeah.
there's some evidence that maybe we are all one, we are all connected.
Have you ever, I mean, heard or read the Bible story of like Adam and Eve and how, you know, it was in the Garden of Eden and God told Adam and Eve to never eat the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden. The tree of knowledge, it was called the tree of knowledge of good and
Yep.
evil. You know, I have had that thought to like, are we making that tree? Don't eat off it, you know? So
But that's a
I
good
don't
point.
know, man. Like it's so much bigger, and I feel like I'm not aware of everything going on. And um I think it's one thing if you're using AI to make something for your podcast, you know, rather than make a metalcore album that you're going to try to like you know, monetize. You know, you're going to try to like make money off of this, where, you know, AI made this for you. I don't think that, you know, AI bands should, I just don't think that should be a thing. I think that's fucking stupid. But anyway,
Yeah, no. I agree. Well, it's hard because even when podcasting, right? And this is where one of the reasons why I looked into the AI music stuff. So there's people who literally are using software, AI software, and they're putting in a topic that they want a 1 hour podcast to be about, and then they say, I want it between a male and a female between this age, or their voice
yeah,
something. And it just creating a fake conversation. People are putting it on iTunes and Spotify, monetizing it. People are doing it on YouTube, similar things. It was like these fake stories of like, I remember, I don't know how or why YouTube was sending me this algorithms. They suppressed my show and then they give me all the weirdest shit, and I'm just it was like some fake AI talking to people who've been through trauma, like they've been in jail, prostitutes or whatever. But you could tell it was like a dark room and it was all fake. And I'm like, and it was like really intimate, like parts of the story that they were sharing. And I'm just like, this woman talking about being raped and like all the specifics. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And uh and then I go on the channel and I'm like, it's completely like there's no signs of human life. It was all like
Yeah.
a fake name, no links to any Facebook or Instagram where you could see a human face. It was all, I'm like, people are just, and then there was commercials on these videos. So it's like somebody's just monetizing off fake shit. And
And all
to
the comments are fake from fake accounts, and
dude, it's what's the theory? There's that theory, that name for the dead internet, right? Or they call it the dead internet theory, where like eventually the internet's gonna be dead because the majority, because a huge percentage of what's online now is fake, and they're like at some point it's gonna surpass just the real things, that literally the internet's gonna be dead because everything you go on and visit and all the websites and all the comments and all the content, everything's just gonna be fake. It's
yeah,
just gonna be a fake world, which sounds pessimistic, but the optimistic view on it is I think it's going to lose its appeal because of it. I think if it goes that far, when you hang out with your buddies at the local pub and you're catching up, you're going to be like, wow, this feels way better than staring at a screen, right?
yeah,
And even social media, they call it social media, but the most anti-social people I know are always on social media. The most depressed people I know, the loneliest people I know, are always on social media. And then I know people who don't even have Facebook, Instagram. They don't have any social media, and they have tons of friends, and they're happy and fulfilled. And then the person who has millions of followers online is lonely and self-medicating. So it just doesn't. I just don't think it will replace that human interaction. I think there's something about our reality, something about our universe that hasn't been discovered during our time. I think maybe in past generations has been discovered. And maybe things, maybe there has been a great flood. Maybe who knows? But a lot of these old writings and scriptures, like I think they might have not understood what was going on, but there was some knowledge, some old wisdom we can learn from that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a whole nother rabbit hole that if you want to come down, you can join me again on the show. We'll do a whole other episode of just the weird shit that we're
Dude,
into.
I'm down for whatever. There's another podcast that I've kind of guested on, and we talk like video games. It's not all the music and stuff like that. We'll
Yeah.
talk video games or we'll talk whatever. I actually used to be a co-host on another podcast too called Zanzizi, and it was just kind of like a history thing, and there was some conspiracy stuff too, I guess. But yeah, dude, I'm down to clown whenever. One thing too, I will say before I go, I've got like 10% left on my phone. Uh, I recently, like over the last year, really kind of started trying to invest more. Like I don't really fully understand like the stock market and like crypto and all that kind of stuff, but I'm kind of dabbling in some of it. And one thing that I do feel like is like even though I don't support AI, like it's kind of at the point where like if you don't invest in it, you just work till you die then. Like jump on the train, invest in it, make sure that you can stop working, enjoy like a really nice retirement at some point, or don't and just work until you drop. So
Yeah.
that's something that I've been thinking a little bit about lately.
Yeah, well, I think the way we've kind of built the system of like being it's accepted to just work. The reason why everybody needs to retire is because the majority of people are doing a job that they hate. And I always say, if you could look at every individual, every kid, right? And I'll tell you a quick study. Like they talked about how this guy Hunter Motz, he wrote the book The Straight A Conspiracy, and he's actually not very conspiratorial, but it was just the conspiracy was like, hey, that kid's smart or creative because he was born that way, and I can't be. And he's like, that was the conspiracy. They convinced you that you are automatically this thing or that thing when really you're capable of everything. And he talked about how uh so basically like in, I think it was like kindergarten or whatever, first grade, they would ask these kids like, how many of you in this class, raise your hand, think you're creative? And like every kid would raise their hand, right? Every kid had imagination, right? Raise your hand. And then you go through the ages, right? The next grade, the next grade, the next grade. And eventually you got to a point where nobody raised their hand, right? And what I think happens is that society tells you, hey, being creative is a waste of time. You know, get a good paying job. Like everything's like it's a sabotage dream. It's a
Just to get you into this, just to get you going in the system.
Yeah,
That's it.
they want you to be a productive part of the system, and that means that you don't question the system. You participate in the system. You don't do anything to throw a monkey wrench in the system, and you'll be okay. And then you just do this job, and then you get a nice little retirement when you're too old to actually even enjoy traveling or anything. That's when you're gonna,
And then the whole time you're eating like shit, so you can be part of the like,
the medical system.
the profit, the for-profit healthcare system, and you're just gonna be miserable and you're gonna be sick.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so I think if you took kids and you said, hey, what's that thing that you enjoy doing that somebody else considers work or doesn't enjoy doing it? That's your thing. And let's just grow. Let's grow to figure out how you can make money or have a career, or do something you enjoy revolving that thing. And then that way you wouldn't be thinking like, I cannot wait till I fucking retire, because I hate this job. No, you'd be waking up every day saying like, I cannot wait to create. I cannot wait to use this talent that I have. I cannot wait to come up with this new idea. I can't, and you do. That's the problem, is that everybody we're content with like just being miserable until we retire, and that's like, and it's like that's not the world we have to live in. That's the world that we've been given, but we don't have to live in that. And
No,
it doesn't have to be accepted to be that way either.
you're allowed to experience peace. You're allowed to experience happiness. You're allowed to experience joy. That you don't have to be a part of all of that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And speaking of that, I'm glad that you're back to doing something you love and enjoy, and the band's back together. And I'll put links to your website, your YouTube channel, all that stuff in the show description, your Instagram page. What can listeners look forward to? Like, when is the more music going to be dropped? Do you have some type of idea of when the EP might be released? Also, like any touring dates, anything like that?
Um, no touring dates, but there's some live stuff we're working on for this coming year. And we don't have the EP is recorded, it's completed, but we're kind of rolling out the release for it slow. Like our goal is to release it at some point earlier in this next year. But we do want to create some more things to kind of go along with it. So like we'll probably do another video for the next song. And honestly, you know, we do want to get that out quickly. So we're going to be kind of like working a lot heavier on this release after the holidays. I think we got off this tour. We just got back from the UK for going there for 2 weeks, and now it's like the Christmas season, so we just kind of got to get through the holidays with everybody, and then we're gonna kind of like resume on pushing forward with this stuff, and you guys are gonna hear some great music. And um, our goal actually is to actually put our goal is to get back into the studio this spring to continue to work on some more music. So we've got one release already done, ready to, we're in the process of rolling that out, but we're going to be working on some more stuff as well. And our hope is to try to like hit some festivals, things where we can fly in and out, and all of that. My other band, Glassfield, is working on some new music. We put out a record in 2024 called Leave a Light On, which I love to pieces, and we're working on some new music as well. So hopefully you know, we'll be able to put pen to paper and get into the studio maybe some point this year or something for new Glassfield stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll put links to that project also in the show description.
Thank you.
What type of music is Glassfield?
Glassfield is to me it's almost like grunge meets like post-hardcore or post-punk even. Uh it's raw and moody, and it's not really like a hardcore band. It's not like a metal band, but there's some heavier aspects. There's like louder aspects. There's feedback. There's singing. There's a lot of melody, but then there's a lot of like screaming as well, and just yeah. I don't fucking know. Just check it out.
Just
It's
listen.
cool.
Exactly.
It's cool. It'll make you sad. It'll make you rage. It'll get you stoked. It'll make you sing along. It's cool. Just check
Yeah.
it out.
And if you're into bands, they should be drastically different, right? Why would you want to do more of the same, right? Well,
If you are into bands, you should check this one out.
great promo.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, TJ. I really, really appreciate it and really enjoyed our conversation. I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live, and hopefully we stay in touch.
All right, Ricky, that sounds good, man. Let me know if you want to do it again, and
Absolutely.
we'll be in touch. All right.
Great. Thanks for the time. Take care.
All right, homie. See you later.